Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Food as Medicine, a three-part community series focused on living well and preventing type 2 diabetes through nutrition, physical activity, cooking, and emotional well-being. I'm really glad you're able to join us for part 3, which is our final event in the series, focused on how stress management and forgiveness can create a life with less stress and more balance. My name is Emily York. I'm a project manager at Legacy Health and a clinical psychologist by training. Tonight's event is made possible through the partnership and support of Legacy Health, Basics Market, Comagine Health, and a generous donation from Dr. R.D. Hull, a previous endocrinologist at Legacy Health. I think I forgot to mention that I mentioned Basics Market. Anyway, sorry about that. We also need to acknowledge the cooperative agreement funded by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Its contents are solely the responsibility of the authors and do not necessarily represent the views of the Centers for Disease Control or the Department of Health and Human Services. Next slide, please. Before we get going, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items so you can have the best experience possible. You can listen to this webinar through your computer speakers or by calling in with your phone. We generally recommend using your computer speakers or a headset if you have one available. At the bottom of your screen, you should see 3 buttons. To the far left is the audio settings, and in the middle, you'll see the Q&A. For the audio settings, if you click on that button, you're going to be able to send a test sound to check your speakers, and we recommend you turn the volume all the way up. And also note that during the presentation, your microphones will be muted. In terms of Q&A, you're welcome to submit questions at any point during the presentation. To do that, click on the Q&A button and a window will appear. And you can click send questions anonymously or to the whole group. You can also keep the window open and see what types of questions are coming in. If you see a question that looks interesting to you or maybe similar to one that you'd like to ask, give it a thumbs up. We have somebody on the other side who's going to be tracking these questions. And during the live Q&A portion, we're going to try to focus on those questions that are most popular first. Now, if you're having any technical issues, the Q&A box is another way that you can get help. There are a lot of people joining us tonight, and I'm sure there'll be lots of great questions. We're going to send a follow-up email about 2 weeks after tonight's broadcast that will have some of the responses we weren't able to get to tonight. And also tonight's webinar will be recorded. The slides and the recording, along with other resources that are mentioned, will be also included in that follow-up email about 2 weeks from tonight. You can also access the videos via the Legacy Health Diabetes Prevention Program website or the Basics Food Market YouTube page. Because a lot of you have emailed me and said that perhaps you weren't able to get to one of the previous meetings or that you perhaps didn't get the email, we're going to actually include all of the information, all of the videos, and all of the resources from all 3 events in the series so that you'll have them all together in one place. Now that we've covered the housekeeping items, I'd love to share more about our event. Did you know, next slide please, did you know that 1 in 3 US adults has prediabetes and 9 out of 10 don't know they have it? Prediabetes is when your blood sugars are high, the levels are high but not quite high enough to get you in the diabetes range. And the goal of this 3-part series is to bring awareness to prediabetes and discuss realistic steps that you can take to lower your risk of developing type 2 diabetes and other chronic disease. And as I always say with these, hopefully you'll also have a little fun. And at the end of this session, we'll also share another resource, and that's the National Diabetes Prevention Program. This program is an evidence-based lifestyle change program, which has been proven to delay or avoid development of type 2 diabetes in those who are at high risk. Now tonight, for the final part in this series, we're lucky to have 2 expert speakers. Usually we just have 1, so for our final, we've got 2 for you, who are going to focus on stress management, forgiveness, and health. Now the last 2 sessions we focused on, we touched on nutrition and physical activity. And so this is the 3rd component and what we think are all important factors in living a healthy life and having a high quality of life. And also during tonight's session, you're going to have Sam Maggi back from Basics Market, who'll be doing a live cooking demonstration. For those of you that don't know Basics Market, it's a locally owned market with purpose. nurturing strong, healthy communities through food. With simplified selection, fresh ingredients, and helpful recipes, there are 5 locations in the Portland area are small and accessible, focused on just what you need to cook healthy meals at home. They source organic meat, eggs, and milk, and cheese from their own farms and dairies, and use their own vans to deliver to their markets directly, keeping prices accessible. There are Wild Rose Foods Farms. Now that is definitely a tongue twister. Wild Rose Foods Farms and local makers prioritize soil health, animal welfare, regenerative practices, and seasonal rhythms to yield delicious, nutritious food. All right, and now let's meet our speakers. In addition to her work at Legacy Weight and Diabetes Institute, Dr. Asani H. Sewell is a tenured associate professor and licensed clinical psychologist in the School of Graduate Psychology at Pacific University. Dr. Sewell's clinical and research interests include obesity, type 2 diabetes, and chronic physical illness in African Americans and populations, as well as positive health psychology, especially forgiveness. Dr. Sewell is a patient-centered clinician that enjoys helping people reach their health goals. In her free time, she enjoys time in her garden, hiking, and birdwatching. I'd also like to introduce Ladera Perez Lin. She's a master's level 3rd year psychology doctoral student at Pacific University. She's performed clinical work at the Pacific Psychology and Comprehensive Health Clinic and at Quest Center for Integrative Health. A Pacific Islander, Ladera has a special interest in serving minority populations with diabetes, obesity, and other chronic health conditions. In her free time, she enjoys spending time outdoors with her golden retriever, Douglas Fir. And without any further ado, I'll turn it over to Dr. Sewell and Ladera Perez Lin.
Hey, wonderful. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad to be here with you today. And so, as was mentioned, we're going to be talking with you about stress management, forgiveness, and health. Next slide, please. So today we're going to be discussing these topics. We're going to be talking about some of the causes of stress. We'll talk a little bit about the link between stress and diabetes as you think about managing your lifestyle and improving your health. We'll also speak a little bit about healthy ways to cope with stress. And then we'll wrap up with talking a bit about forgiveness and health. We're here in January, the top of the year. These seem like important topics to talk about as you make plans and you look forward to the rest of the year. Next slide, please. Ladera, we're turning over to you, please. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So let's talk about stress. What are some things that make you feel stressed? Let's take a second and think about your top 3 stressors. I'm sure for many of you, this is an easy list to come up with, especially right now in the pandemic and given our current political climate. These are big stressors and little stressors. There are little stressors like losing your keys and big stressors like presenting. For this presentation, we'll be focusing on some of the big ones that are commonly experienced by us all. Let's take a look at this list here. Conflict with others. The worst fights are the ones involving your family and friends. This can be really distressing. Health concerns. This is a big one. Navigating chronic illness or a new diagnosis, or trying to remember to take all of your medications. Taking care of ourselves can be overwhelming at times. Finances, making ends meet, making sure all of your needs are being met. There's a lot of pressure there. And job stressors. Does work stress follow you home? Let's start thinking about some ways to practice leaving work stress at work so that you can be relaxed at home and enjoy your time at home. I do want to acknowledge that many of you may be working from home right now, which is even more of a reason to work on managing your stress so it doesn't negatively impact the rest of your life. Some of you may even be juggling all of these stressors at once. This can be detrimental to your health, but how exactly? A lot of us might not be aware of just how much stress can impact our health and well-being. So let's talk about that. Next slide, please. Stress and type 2 diabetes. Let's talk about the direct impact that stress can have on your body and your mind. Being stressed can really impact your emotional and mental health just as much as your physical health, too. Stress can change your body in different ways, right? It can change your body chemistry to make you more likely to get type 2 diabetes. But how does this happen? Let's talk a little bit briefly about the physical effects on your body. Stress can increase your lipid levels. This can lead to high cholesterol. Stress can also elevate your blood pressure. This can lead to heart disease or stroke. It can even decrease your immunity. This impacts your body's ability to fight off infection and disease. It can increase your hormonal activity. So when you are stressed, your insulin levels drop and your stress hormones increase. And what this means is that it makes it harder for your insulin to work the way that it should. And all of this may raise your blood sugar, which can be really dangerous for people with diabetes or those at risk for type 2 diabetes. And on the other hand, so we have our physical health, right? The effects that stress has on your physical well-being. But we also have to take into consideration the effect that stress can have on your emotional and mental health. How do you feel when you're stressed out? Again, I want you to take a second to come up with a couple emotions or feelings that you experience when you're stressed. This might be really easy for you. You might be stressed out right now. So what comes up for me and what are some common emotions that people can experience are being unmotivated, being irritable, being restless and anxious. If we're feeling unmotivated, it's hard to take care of ourselves. If we're irritable, this can impact our interpersonal lives. It can impact how we treat our loved ones and interact with friends and family. If we're feeling restless, it's hard to get sleep. And as we all know, sleep is so important for our well-being and overall health. We can even feel anxious when we're stressed. That makes it hard for us to focus on things that really matter, like your work or getting that project done that you've been putting off. So far we know that 1, stress directly impacts our physical health. 2, stress can lead to uncomfortable and unwanted negative emotional states like being irritable, anxious, unmotivated. All of these emotions can be overwhelming, which can actually lead us to act out in unhealthy ways. And that's the third point I want to focus on for today, is how stress can lead us to act in unhealthy ways. Now that we've talked about how we feel when we're stressed and what causes that, let's talk about how we can act when we are stressed. Next slide, please. Stress and unhealthy actions. How do you act when you're stressed? Some of us may turn to comfort foods or binge watch our favorite TV shows or all of the above, right? Maybe when we're stressed, we're not acting in the healthiest way, and that's okay. We all have our coping mechanisms, and they may work for the time being, and they may work for right now, but it's just a matter of what is sustainable in the long run. And as you know, some of these coping mechanisms, like binge watching your favorite TV shows or turning to those comfort foods that might not be the healthiest choices, they could have some serious negative consequences in the long run. Stress impacts our health habits. And that's what we really want to emphasize today is a health habit. What is that? A health habit is exactly what it sounds like. It's the actions we take to stay healthy that become part of our daily routines. All of the things we do to take care of ourselves and our well-being. Taking our medication, exercising, eating nutritious foods, drinking enough water, getting enough sleep, spending time with loved ones. When we are stressed, it's really hard to engage in those health habits. All of the things I mentioned earlier, the things that we do for ourselves, they suddenly get put on the back burner. Research has shown that stress can lead to increased substance use, decreased nutrition, decreased sleep. And this is nothing new. I'm sure we've all been there. Research has also shown us some of the more serious effects that stress can have on our health behaviors. It has shown decreased compliance with medical regimens or medication adherence. If you're stressed out, you tend to put yourself last. You forget about that doctor's appointment that you were supposed to go to, or skip a dose of medication. It's hard to take care of ourselves. So let's try and alleviate some of that stress so we're better able to do so. We know that stress is not preventable. It is a common human experience, but we can find ways to reduce it. So let's talk about some of those ways. Next slide, please. Ways to cope with stress. Have you ever been stressed and someone has suggested you need to just relax? Wow, imagine that. If it only were that easy. But that is helpful advice. But how do we get there? How do we get relaxed? I offer you a list of go-tos. Perhaps we can call this your pull-down menu. What you want to do is you want to create a whole list, a whole pull-down menu of options when it comes to self-care or stress management. Because in the moment when we're stressed, we can't think of these things. They don't come to mind easily. It's harder to come up with things on your own. So having something that is nicely laid out and tailored to you specifically can be extremely helpful. So I offer you this list of some items that have been helpful for a lot of people, but I want you to remember that we're all different. So I invite you to use this list for an inspiration, but create your own pull down list menu of things that work for you. Think about different situations and different time frames. If you are a busy parent that only has 10 minutes in the morning before you start your day, I encourage you to find something that works in that 10-minute time range. For example, if I have that time of 10 minutes, I'm going to do a paced breathing exercise. There are wonderful guided relaxation exercises on YouTube or other apps such as Insight Timer, and we will provide those resources at the end. But if you have more time, say 30 minutes, this might be a good time for you to take a short walk outside or do some light stretching. Maybe make some tea, sit in the sunlight. It's little things like that that really make a difference. And if you want, you can sit down and actually write down a pull down menu for yourself and put it somewhere that's easily accessible, especially in hard times. This can be in your bag, in your desk, in your office, anywhere that you think would be really helpful. And everyone is different. So just keep that in mind. What works for you may not work for others, and what works for others may not work for you. So get creative, talk with your friends and family about it. So I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Sewell to talk more about what your individual wellness might look like.
Thank you, Ladera. Next slide, please. So this next slide is our wellness wheel, and it is meant to just represent for all of us the fact that when it comes to thinking about managing our health, managing our lives, that our wellness is very complex. It consists of many different layers, many different things. So when you think about managing your stress, when you think about your wellness, you want to think about these various domains that could be impacted. Okay, so consider your spirituality, your emotional lives, etc., and find ways to manage, find ways to engage in self-care in all these different areas. Doesn't suggest that at every moment you have to engage in self-care in all these areas and stress management, but rather that you think about the area that's being most impacted and you start there. Next slide, please. So we're going to spend the last couple of minutes here talking a little bit about forgiveness, which is such an important topic. very dear to my heart. And when we think about forgiveness, what are we talking about? We're thinking about that motivation that we might have within each of us to think, feel, and act positively towards someone who has offended us or caused harm in some way. Now, this could be forgiveness, little f, like the kind of forgiveness that we might lend to someone who has cut us off in line, for example, or who stubbed our toe when they were walking by. Or it could be forgiveness, big F, those kinds of hurts or slights that we've carried with us for a long time. But in the end, the thing to know about forgiveness is that forgiveness is for you, not for anyone else, not for the person who's caused harm, because forgiveness has really true valuable impacts on our physical and mental well-being. So when you think about why should I forgive, I'm forgiving for myself. Next bullet point on this slide, please. Or next slide. There we go. Forgiveness being beneficial for all of us, right? But we might need assistance in achieving forgiveness. So on the next slide, please, I have some ideas for how we might be able to get there. Now, here are a couple of quotes just quickly here on some reasons why we might forgive here. You can go ahead and load all the quotes that are here, please. Thank you. And these quotes just remind us of the importance of forgiveness, that in our cultural and spiritual traditions, we can see quite clearly the importance of forgiving along the way, right? And that once again, it's something that we do for ourselves. And by doing it for ourselves, we do it for the whole world. Next slide, please. So what are some key strategies for forgiveness? Well, we already have in our backpack some of the strategies that Ladera talked about, for example, for managing our stress. We can add to those some strategies for forgiveness. Now, once again, I would suggest to you that you start with forgiveness, small f. Start with those small slights that have happened along the way that you've not had a chance to let go of now, and pick a strategy from this list. For example, expressive writing. That is where you can journal or write a letter to the person who has harmed or offended you in some way, or perhaps you write it to yourself if you feel like you've caused harm to someone else. You can write it freely, without concern, and you do not need to turn that letter in to anyone in order to reap the benefits of forgiveness, to get that release that forgiveness gives. You might do some perspective taking. And by that, we mean that you might put yourselves in the shoes of the person who has harmed or offended you and think a little bit about, why did they do that? How could this have happened? What was their motivation? And from taking that perspective, then you might also come to some degree of forgiveness. So no matter what strategy you decide to take, start small, continue with forgiveness. It's really an important thing to do. Next slide. You can go ahead and load this. I think we are close to time here, but we just wanted to review really quickly some of our key points. We hope that you've gotten these. The importance of managing your stress. It can have negative impacts on your mental and physical well-being. And really too, that you can't prevent stress necessarily, but you can work to find new ways to reduce it. Ladera has made the point here at bullet point number 3 of practicing self-care at least 10 minutes each and every day. And then don't forget that forgiveness is so beneficial to your physical and mental well-being. It's the gift that you first give to yourself, then to the rest of the world. But you can't imagine that you can just go ahead and forgive someone, right? You can't just achieve it automatically, but rather through some of these strategies like expressive writing, meditation, perspective taking, you can find ways to achieve forgiveness. That's it for us. We'll see you at the Q&A. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Sewell and Ladera. Before we begin the cooking segment, I'd like to remind everyone to continue to submit questions in the Q&A. Dr. Sewell and Ladera will answer some of the most popular questions after the segment. Don't forget to give a thumbs up in the Q&A for questions you like the most. I know some people worry about being able to cook fresh, heart-healthy meals that taste good. Maybe that it's too hard or too complicated, or maybe too time-consuming. The good news is that it doesn't have to be any of these things. Sam Maggi, the chef from Basics Food Kitchen, is here tonight to show us how to make a couple of different recipes to get you started. Now, a little bit about Sam. Culinary mentor Sam Maggi has taught hundreds of culinary skills and cooking classes to people from ages 4 to 84. With decades of experience in restaurant and production kitchens, in roles including executive chef, sous chef, and catering chef, Sam brings his love of world cuisine and culinary expertise to the Basics team. A chef of many hats, he develops and tests recipes and products working hand in hand with our prepared foods and nutrition teams, teaching classes both virtually and in person. Passionate about gardening, he respects ingredients and how they're grown, raised, or foraged. An active member of the local community garden, Sam has a keen appreciation for the Northwest bounty and believes that fresh seasonal food, locally sourced, always tastes better. He enjoys spending time cooking with his daughters, exploring new cuisines, and learning. Welcome, Sam.
All right, thank you, Emily. I'm happy to be back and presenting a really nice and hopefully relaxing dish to make. Cooking can be a great way to relieve stress, at least it is for me. And along those lines, you know, you want to come into any dish, and a recipe like this with some cutting and things like that, come into it with a mindset of relaxation and moving slow. Although I'm going to kind of move a little bit fast because we're under a time restraint, but you know, in your own kitchen, I think sometimes people get overwhelmed with the recipe and this and that, but it's important to keep in mind to breathe and take some breaks and kind of, you know, time your recipe out in a way that's comfortable for you. Anyway, but right now I have to get going here. So this is a dish that it's a golden milk steamed rockfish with vegetables. Golden milk is sort of a drink that is often made with coconut milk, and it can be made with regular milk as well, and it has some spice elements of ginger and turmeric. Turmeric and ginger are both really healthy roots that have benefits for our heart and our immune system, and all over make you feel well. So we're going to use those two things, and then some of our own high protein, low fat milk that we've developed in our dairy. And the milk is, it's squeezed from the most muscular cows we have. They work out regularly, so it's high protein, low fat. Anyway, you can also use, of course, coconut milk would be delicious with this dish. All right, let's get started. So this, also, this is just a wonderful technique. This dish, you could mix up the vegetables you're using. You could use different proteins, different sorts of fish. We're using rockfish here. You could use chicken. It's really nice with chicken. So the technique is really what I want to look at here. So first we're going to bloom our spices. We have the turmeric, which is that wonderful golden color, and some ginger. Both of these are ground, you know, dried spices, and we're going to bloom them. So that's where you're just putting them in your skillet, and you want to sort of get the aromatics going. And while that is happening, we can slice up our veggies. I have some stuff pre-sliced, but I did want to show a couple cuts. So with the carrot, of course, you know, I peeled a carrot, and then I've cut it in half. So this is a nice size to work with this dish. Is sort of a couple inches long and very slender, which is a julienne cut. Now with any vegetable, and especially like an awkward type, well, most vegetables are a little awkward, right? Nature gives us many shapes to play with. And so what we need to do is make some flat surfaces which are safe to cut with. So after you've cut your carrot in half, if you've got a nice wide base like this, you can simply slice down the side, and then you get another really good stable base to work off of. And then just cut down, again, pinching your blade between your thumb and forefinger, getting that balance point on your knife, and then using the claw with your other hand to keep well out of the way of the blade. And then we're just going to kind of do nice thin slices across. And again, we are not stressing out, just taking it nice and easy, making those thin cuts. And so this is a julienne cut, or sometimes called a matchstick cut. And if you are comfortable, you can stack a couple, few slices up and then cut across that way, and it'll save a little bit of time. Or you can just go, it's perfectly fine to do just one slice at a time. All right, so that's our carrot julienne, and that's one carrot. And then we have celery. We're also going to julienne. And again, we're slicing in half. And then the celery, you're just, kind of following the lines, and you just want it nice and thin. And again, you're thinking about ease of eating as well here. So that's where that thin cut comes in. All right, so I'm getting a nice aroma from the spices here. And then we have the leek is left. So leeks come like this, and leeks are grown in mud and sand. So it's really important to wash the leek. So you want to take the end off and then cut just to where you just past the dark green to the light green. And this is all the really wonderful usable part here. And this is actually a great thing for making veggie stocks, chicken stocks. So hold on to these, and you can put veggie scraps like this in a bag or a container covered in your freezer, and just collect them until you're ready to make stock. But this is a very valuable piece of vegetation for making delicious veggie stocks. So then you've got your leek, and again, you're just going to kind of cut that into a nice, few inches size there. And then we'll just cut that down the middle. And then once again, just like the celery and the carrot across, and with the leek, it's going to go ahead and fall right apart for us. And then what I like to do to wash the leek is put it in a strainer such as this, put it under some nice cold water, and just, this was a pretty nice clean leek, but sometimes there's a lot of mud in there and so forth. So, all right. So we're gonna go ahead and throw our veggies in the skillet. And so I'm using a cast iron skillet with a lid. Any sort of pan or even a Dutch oven or whatever you've got that has a lid will work for this dish. If you have a cast iron and use it, you'll know that it's just a really great piece of equipment. And I'd highly recommend cast iron. It gets a good even heat, and it's nice to take it with a dish like this. You can take it from your stovetop into your oven with ease, and it works great in both arenas. All right, so now I'm going to drop the carrots and the celery in there. And one thing I've been enjoying with this dish is the fennel. So at the end of the recipe, it talks about topping with some herbs and like that. And we've got some dill, some chives for the end, and then some fennel. And this is a fennel bulb. These are happening right now. These are seasonal. They're in season, I should say. And they're just delicious. And so I actually like using some of the bulb as well as the frond. So the frond is nice for the top. I'm just going to give these a little toss here. And we can also, at this stage, add our 1/4 teaspoon of pepper. And we're going to add some salt, a 1/4 teaspoon of salt as well. And this is just a really nice, colorful dish. So this would help, if you're having a gray kind of day, this will brighten it for sure, both flavor-wise and color-wise. All right, so we've got some fronds reserved, and then here's the bulb. I just wanted to quickly show you how to take care of a fennel bulb. Again, this could be good for stock. Fennel has that lovely kind of licoricey flavor, just real just a real nice background flavor, and it goes wonderfully with this dish. And again, you've got a vegetable that has these ribs. So we're going to cut along those ribs once again. And once again, the proper technique with our knife, pinched and relaxed. You never want to put too much pressure on your knife. It should be sharp enough that you can cut through without putting a lot of pressure, and then you're less likely to actually hurt yourself, even if for some reason the blade were to come into contact with your hand, which you just don't want to happen anyway, but you don't want to be pressing really hard. Okay, so you can see this is coming along with the turmeric is really coloring it. And it's starting to smell good, I would say. All right. And this dish, again, the technique here is really neat, where we're building it in the skillet. Real simple, just a few ingredients, and then we're going to put it in the oven to finish. So it gives you some time to sort of plan the rest of your menu. But if you are having sides with this, I've eaten this with rice, is very nice. Quinoa would be good with this. That would add a little more lean protein to your meal. Let's see, I've got my fish down here in the refrigerator. So as I mentioned, we are using a rockfish. So I've got some nice rockfish fillets here. And again, fish comes in all shapes and sizes. So sometimes you'll encounter a thinner fillet, and some of these are thin, so they'll cook rather quickly. And these are kind of long ones. So what I'm going to do here is cut them in half, because I really want them to fit into here, into our deal here, our skillet. And I'm going to choose, so if you're using a thicker cut or a chicken breast or something like that, it might take a little longer for sure than this very thin fillet we're looking at here. And I'm going to do like 5 pieces here, just because I can. And it's always important with whatever you are making to make it your own. This is a template. This is a beautiful template for you to build your own creation off of. And so don't stress out if it doesn't look like this. If it looks different, that's super cool also. All right. So now we have the lemon. And so we're going to go ahead, and I'm going to cut this lemon into 8 wheels. So we're going to take the end off each side. And then we'll just cut it. Well, I'm just going to go down the line here. This was a little bit of a short lemon, so we'll get like 6, and that's okay. And then we're going to put a couple wheels on each piece of fish here, or so. And then we're going to drizzle with the olive oil. So I have 2 tablespoons of olive oil here, and I'm just going to drizzle that right over everything. And with the oil, I concentrate a little bit on the fish, just to kind of lubricate that a little bit. And then our lovely high protein milk made from those muscular cows. And then we're drizzling that over. These are very healthy cows. I've met some of them, and they're also very friendly. Okay, so I'm turning the heat up a little bit. We're kind of going into medium high here. And then we're going to cover this. And then after, I'm going to show you one more step here before we go to questions. And what I'm thinking we can do is we'll pop it in the oven, go to questions, and then come back and have a look at it. But there is another step after we kind of get to a simmer here. You just want to take some of your beautiful golden milk, which is developing. It's just that nice golden color and delicate flavor. And you just want to baste the fish a little bit, and just kind of make sure all your veggies aren't stuck to the bottom of the pan or anything like that. And give it a good basting. And we're achieving a simmer. So I feel that we can, well, I'll put it in the oven and then we'll go to questions. So I have, I'm gonna pop it in, we have a really noisy oven here, but I am turning it on in a moment. And I did preheat this oven. So you want your oven preheated, and the oven is preheated to 375. And I'm just going to put the skillet in there with the lid on the skillet. And then while that is cooking, it takes about 8 minutes. You'll want to check it at 5 minutes. These very thin fillets will, like I mentioned, they might really go just 5 minutes. Fish you want to cook to 145 degrees. A handy device to have is a digital thermometer. It's great for cooking any meat, especially where you really want to look at those cook temperatures. Fish 145 degrees, so that's what we'll be looking for. And then if you like your fish a little more well done, you can let it go longer. And anyway, while the fish is in the oven, we can be looking at cutting up some herbs. So I have some chives here and some dill, and then of course the fennel fronds. So I'm just going to cut these up, and then we'll answer some questions, and in a few minutes come back and we'll plate up the fish and see if we can make it look pretty. Over to you, Emily.
Thank you, Sam. That looks delicious. I can't wait to see it coming out of the oven. And I appreciate everyone entering questions into the Q&A. You can continue to do that while we roll through some of these. And we'll start by taking some of these questions live. So the first one I'll address to Dr. Sewell and Ladera. A question about, would you please define the word forgiveness? To this person, it means that when someone does something wrong, you are sanctioning it, saying it's okay or understandable. I'm often unable or unwilling to do that if I think the person cannot be held to account. I can decide to just forget about the offense, but not forgive it.
Helps if I unmute myself, please forgive me. So such an important question. The definition of forgiveness is letting go of the negative thinking, feeling, and behaviors that you have towards someone who's harmed or offended you to some regard, and making those more positively oriented. That's what we mean. So letting go of all of the stress and struggle that comes with holding on to a grudge. And you know how it feels when we hold on to a grudge of some kind. We feel it in our bodies, we feel it in our minds. It's a lot of physical and emotional work, which is why I've said that I really do consider forgiveness to be that gift that you give to yourself by releasing and letting it go. Now, in suggesting that we forgive people, it does not mean that we're forgetting. We can forgive someone completely, but not forget the negative thing that they've done to us, the harm that they've caused us, the pain that they've caused us. We don't have to forget. We can forgive someone completely and decide to not have a relationship with them because they have harmed us in some way as well. So you're not required to continue to be in a relationship in order to forgive. And again, I think going back to some of those strategies in terms of how you can get to forgiveness in those situations that are really difficult. Maybe writing a letter, for example, to the person that's harmed or offended you in some way. Getting out the grievance, right? Getting that off your chest. Also, maybe writing a little bit about what some of the reasons would be to forgive them. And you don't have to mail the letter at all or give it to them at all. That's not required at all. So those are some things to sort of think about, I think, with respect to this person's questions, that you can forgive someone completely. You can begin to sort of let it go without forgetting. The other thing that I'll mention is that forgiveness is a process. So for most of us, you can't forgive just in a snap, right? That you can move from having been harmed and offended to then just forgiving automatically. It takes time and it takes a little bit of work, but slowly, you might be able to find that you can get there. And I would suggest getting there by starting with some of those small F things that you can forgive. The person who cut you off in line, or maybe your order got forgotten, or whatever it is. Start there to practice, to nurture those muscles of forgiveness. And then you might find you have the capacity to move on to those larger forgivenesses that are big F.
Thank you, Dr. Sewell. We have some questions somewhat related to that about what if something someone did was so horrible you find it very difficult to overcome that? Or if someone's not following mask mandates and really impacting your ability to see your family and maybe have that deeper pain with them. Can you add to that?
Yeah. So I think similarly, I mean, when thinking about, for example, those individuals in our lives who maybe aren't following closely the COVID mandates, and we know that they are not only threatening their health and lives, but the health and lives of those around them. It can be very difficult to forgive them or to even understand why they might make that decision. This is where the perspective taking could be helpful. You might try some practice of putting yourself in the person's shoes and asking yourself, why would my loved one do this? What are their reasons for doing this? And maybe trying to see it from their perspective, being in their shoes. And then moving from there, you might then, though, still decide to not be in contact with that person, at least face to face, if they're deciding not to be safe around COVID. So once again, I think that the forgiveness does not require or dictate that you then can't put yourself first. Forgiveness is once again about you, right? And about finding a path of healing for yourself. So from that viewpoint, then you can also find a path forward, I think, with these relatives or family members, relating with them in a way that's going to keep you healthy and safe.
So helpful, Dr. Sewell. Thank you. I'm going to move us on to self-forgiveness and stick with you on this response. So this person's indicating it's so difficult to make all the good health choices all the time and hard to forgive yourself for not living up to goals for health when you know better. So this person's trying to work on consistent healthy habits and have moved into the pre-diabetic range. So do you have some thoughts for them on self-forgiveness and consistency?
I do. Yeah, for sure. We've been talking a lot about forgiveness of others, which is an important component, but forgiveness of self is another piece. And so I appreciate this person's question. You know, when it comes to ways in which we've let ourselves down, we've not lived up to the standard we've set. So you've got a goal for healthy living that you've not been able to meet consistently. This is now where the self-compassion comes in. And the self-compassion basically looks at, like, what would you say to a friend or to a loved one, you know, your spouse, your child, your grandchild, whomever. What would you say to them if they came to you with this concern? If they told you how they felt about themselves, what would you say? Doing this exercise really helps us to discover those loving, compassionate things that we would say to the other person that we need to extend to ourselves. So that's about sort of changing self-talk and really knowing that when it comes to health habits, it is step by step. It's one step forward, 2 steps back, and that you can pave the way forward by lending yourself some self-compassion. So once again, thinking about what you would say to a friend or loved one in this regard, knowing that making healthy changes is a journey, right? You don't arrive there immediately. Applauding yourself for what you have done, and then knowing that small steps in the right direction are going to get you there are some of the ways that I think I would approach the situation.
Thank you. So this question I'm going to pose to both Dr. Sewell and then maybe Sam can jump in. So the question is, what if one of your worst stressors is constant meal prep with no help?
I think I might let Sam take that one. Sam, what do you think?
That is a good one. Well, you know, planning is helpful, and once again I'd like to direct you to our basics website. We have a lot of great recipes there, and a recipe like this rockfish recipe can help alleviate that a bit. In any recipe, you know, where you kind of plan ahead, you gather your ingredients and take your time. And that's the thing that I put emphasis on. And it's hard in professional cooking, and especially, you know, restaurant cooking and prepared foods production. You're often under a lot of pressure, and you know, it is important to work efficiently, for sure, but it's also important to keep in mind you know, your stress level. And so you're not going to be making the most delicious food necessarily if you're under a ton of stress. And what I found helps me, you know, which I can only really talk about what helps me personally, because I know what I do myself to alleviate that a bit, is just to plan. And so for me, it's almost too much. I'm always thinking 2 days ahead about meals, and I pretty much don't ever stop. I'm planning, I'm creating recipes in my sleep. You know, it drives my family bananas. They're like, don't you ever think about anything except food? But I'm very food driven, just like my dog. And so I'm always thinking about food and different ways, you know, to you use it. And for me, that just having that plan, like knowing like tomorrow what I'm making, and I always appreciate like something like this where I know what I'm going to be making, because I know every day I'm going to be cooking from morning till night. That is my life, and I enjoy it. But I really get my most my unstressed cooks sometimes when people say, hey, will you make me this? I'm like, great, I will come up with a clear plan to make that. On the other hand, I also really enjoy a lot of creativity, and I improvise a lot in the kitchen. And you know, often I just have a mishmash of ingredients, and I see, you know, what can I make with this? And it's a lot of fun, but sometimes that can be overwhelming. And I find I can use some self-editing sometimes. So I really appreciate this golden milk rockfish in its simplicity. And there's just these real specific cuts we're making, and then it goes really quickly. And just to get back to that, if I may, it just took 6 minutes in the oven, and it's done. So I hope that sort of answered the question. It's just kind of having a plan with your prep. The no help thing, that is difficult. Finding meals that you can sort of prep in advance is very helpful in a situation like that. So when you do have time to put components together, do it. For example, it's my youngest daughter's 11th birthday today. So if you're watching, happy birthday, Juliet. But I put her cake together over about 4 days. It's a really complicated Swedish princess cake. So there were several stages. And then I tag teamed with my wife, and she finished it this morning with a purple marzipan topping. And so it's beautiful. But you know, not at first I was really overwhelmed with this recipe, and I was like, but I just took it you know, I did the pastry cream one day, I did the jam one day, you know, and I did the baking of the cake one day, and then it all comes together. So that's something to keep in mind. All right, so here is our lovely rockfish. I hope you can see this. And so it cooked up very nicely, real flaky. The wonderful thing about this steaming technique with fish, especially, is it's a really nice, gentle way to cook the fish. If you go in with too much high heat at once with fish, the proteins will come out, and that's where you'll get that kind of white stuff on top. So we don't have that here. The golden milk held together really nicely. And so you can see that. So we're going to go ahead and we'll put a little bit in the bottom of our dish here. And then I'm going to put a bed of the beautiful veggies. And so in a way, this is really a fast food, and like for preparation for this, you could cut all your veggies in advance, even, you know, a day or two in advance. All this stuff will stay good for you in the refrigerator. And that's really the work in this. Then find a nice fresh piece of fish, and you know, you're kind of good to go. All right. And here's some tender fillets of fish. There's these are really tender. There we go.
Sam, while you're dishing that up,
Yeah.
could you speak to whether or not we could use a different type of fish? And if so, what fish would you recommend?
Oh boy, you know, any fish really would do it with this dish, but I think like a firm white fish is best, because you get that kind of, you can really taste the delicate sauce here, the golden milk, with that sort of fish. Something like a salmon would work, but it's a stronger flavored fish, and it might kind of overwhelm the flavors a bit. But really, you know, you're looking at rockfish. You could use, I've done this with cod, and it's been really nice. Sole, which would be really delicate, and it would go quickly. And you know, and chicken, like I've mentioned, I mean, it's not a fish, but chicken works well with this. All right, so maybe we'll stick with one lemon, right? What do you think? It looks nice. And then, so here's our herbs. This is the dill and the fennel here, and then here's the chives. And you know, you get kind of a lovely presentation out of it as well. So there we go. Bon appetit.
Beautiful. Thank you, Sam.
Yeah.
We're running out of time, so we don't have any time for additional questions. So I'm going to turn it back over to Emily to wrap us up for the evening.
Thank you, Kelly. So thank you again for joining us tonight. We were really excited to be able to put on this 3-part series. And as I mentioned earlier, physical activity, nutrition, and emotional well-being are all important components of living a healthy life and having good quality of life. And I know there were some questions that we didn't get around to. So as I mentioned earlier, there'll be a follow-up email about 2 weeks from now that'll come out with all of the live recordings from all 3 events in the series, and also resources and some responses to the questions that we didn't get to tonight. You will also be getting a Legacy Health and Basics Market recipe booklet, which was in the chat a little bit earlier today, but if you didn't notice that, we'll also be sending that out in the email, and you'll get a coupon for Basics Market as a thank you. As a next step, if you're interested in learning more about how you can live well and reduce your risk of type 2 diabetes, consider joining an information session for the National Diabetes Prevention Program. As I mentioned, this is a structured, evidence-based lifestyle change program, and this has actually been shown to help people avoid or delay the onset of type 2 diabetes by up to 58%, or 71% for those of you who are 65 or older. This outperforms metformin and other medications, so that's a pretty amazing outcome there. Most insurances, or many insurances that cover it, and Medicare covers it for its members as well. Legacy Health has 2 upcoming free virtual information sessions for the National Diabetes Prevention Program, one on the 15th, so that's coming right up, and another on the 22nd. And once we end this webinar, a brief survey is going to launch on your screen. There'll be some questions about the event tonight, and we'd love to hear your feedback because we hope to plan many more of these, and your feedback is really helpful. But you'll also have the opportunity to enter your email address and name, some contact information if you are interested in learning more about the National Diabetes Prevention Program or joining one of those free information sessions. So finally, I just want to thank Dr. Asani Sewell, Ladera Perez-Lin, and Sam Maggi for a great presentation and a cooking demonstration tonight. And thank you everyone, and I hope to see you again at a future event. Take care.